Welcome everyone to this market data webinar. My name is Andrea and I'm delighted to be your host today. We have lots of registration for today's webinar and I can already see many of you joining. So thank you very much for being here today with us. To get this started, let's start with a check-in question first, as we'll give everyone else some more seconds to join us on this call. And my question would be, please go to your commentary field and insert or submit why you're here today. Why did you register? What is your motivation to be in this webinar with us? I mean, this is so insightful information for us when we go into the conversation afterwards. I mean, maybe we can also refer back to some of the comments that we see you submitting. And there is another plus to it. You already practice on how to submit questions. I mean, I really want to encourage you to submit questions throughout the whole webinar. There is a dedicated part where we will go through them, and I'm sure you get some smart responses. So again, the question is, what was your motivation to register for today's webinar? Please let us know. There is a commentary field. You can just submit one word or a short question. Good. So why are we here today? What do we focus on? Obviously, it's market data, right? So we'll talk about the latest developments and also innovations in market data consumption, distribution, but also technology adoption. And this is all based on the findings from our newest study, Market Data in the Age of AI. The study has been released on September 23rd, so you can access it via our Global Market Data website. We will reshare the link afterwards, so no worries. So in its third year, the study, by the way, conducted by Coalition Greenwich and SIX, focuses on the trends and challenges really shaping the market data landscape. We've interviewed 50 buy-side firms in US, UK and Europe, and there is some fascinating findings, right, David? I already see you being super excited about that. So, but no worries, we won't be talking about the findings only. We will definitely also go and align them with SIX's strategic response, right? So you will see and hear firsthand how SIX's solutions really align with market needs. Good. So I would say I go and introduce our speakers here with me today, dear colleagues, by the way. So first I would like to start with David Easthope from Coalition Greenwich. It's fantastic to have you here. Then my dear colleagues, Henk Door, Head Product Development, and Matthew Nurse, Head Market Data. It's a blast. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation. And now, without further ado, I would say let's jump into the first question. And clearly, we have to start with the findings, right? We have to start with the study, actually. And David is nodding already. This question goes to you. So what is the standout findings? And maybe also, is there one thing that really caught you by surprise?
Well, thanks, Andrea. As you can tell, I'm excited to be here to share our insights, our findings, and our perspectives. As you mentioned, Crisil Coalition Greenwich was very happy to partner with SIX for the third consecutive year on what amounts to a truly in-depth study of 50 global buy-side firms to really uncover the latest and greatest trends and innovations in market data consumption, distribution, and technology adoption. And you'll see that technology is a big theme this year for sure. First, I'll talk about some of the standout findings, and then I'll share with you what really stood out to me, what was really kind of surprising and interesting this year. And one thing to note is that each year varies a bit, but there's often a very specific theme. And this year, there was a very specific and strong appetite for certain flavors of data, including indices, crypto asset data, as well as risk and regulatory data, a real standout this year. And like a rising tide, we also continue to see this adoption of cloud-based delivery of market data, including for streaming data, such that cloud infrastructure continues to support an expanding frontier of data types and delivery to different functions across the trading and investing workflow. So once again, we see this across the board. Cloud continues to make advances in the market data business. And finally, We also continue to see a strong theme of AI and machine learning across our findings, and I'm sure we'll get into that later. We'll definitely talk about the need for high quality data, including market data, to feed these tools and techniques that are being built around AI and machine learning. And I like to say there's always something new in market data, and perhaps taking a step back and reflecting on what's the most surprising this year is really the growing demand for historical tick data, not just as a replacement for existing data, but as an additional source for investment firms across the trading workflow. And the buy side simply wants more high quality tick data. And so for some insights here, we observed that over 3/4 of buy-side respondents are seeking more and better sources of historical tick data for areas such as market and trade surveillance, the top choice at 85%, as you can see here, among a range of different use cases for this tick data. In examining the use cases, as an analyst, I tend to think of historical tick data as useful for back testing strategies. Maybe that's my experience, my working on trading desk and investment firms. But one thing to keep in mind is this data is actually quite useful in the market and trade surveillance context because it can really improve the actual performance of this function. Whereas areas like TCA are sometimes driven less by performance and more by a simple obligation to report. And so I'm really glad to continue to share these findings with you today. Andrea, I think those are the kind of the key themes in terms of demand, in terms of the sort of flavors and spices from this year, and happy to turn it back to you to continue the discussion.
Thank you very much. Wow, this was scientific almost. I mean, that's your job, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I mean, in between the lines, and you know, some of you know, I'm a psychologist, so I'm super curious always to see and learn. And Matt, I guess this question would go to you. I mean, do those findings indicate any shifts in client behavior and/or expectations? I mean, David touched on it, but what is your view?
Absolutely, Andrea. So, I mean, through the 3 years which we've conducted this study, you start to see common themes of things that are always there. So, for example, the demand for quality of data comes to the top. It's the reason why people would pick particular vendors, particular venues, and it's the key part of managing data within a financial institution. Also, there is the continued move into APIs from the file delivery. Naturally, this is aligned to a greater demand for response type APIs, particularly because the frequency needed data is also shifting. The speed at which processes within financial institutions is moving means that it's more than just trading now that do things in an intraday or a real-time kind of format. So in the last 3 years, we've seen a continued move towards better quality, the move towards real time, and obviously looking more closely at the types of APIs and other solutions that are used for the delivery of data. I think it's interesting to that point that you look at the use cases, as you can see now, as to where the buy side says they need and use real-time data a lot and most, and obviously risk and compliance, really interesting to see that coming to the top. You'd expect portfolio and kind of brokerage and execution to be a more natural place where real-time is used. But this has been the real standout in terms of the change in the demand for that kind of data. Interesting enough, also in the study is, where do people get data from? And this is changing. The traditional vendor-based approach is still the majority approach of the respondents we had, with over 3/4 of people saying that their principal data source is coming from third-party vendors. But you also see a lot more of the cloud and platform industry picking up as an alternative or a different way in which people pick up data, of which obviously that doesn't really change the vendor space because the vendors do deliver to these types of platforms. But obviously that landscape is potentially adding more complexity. And that's been a big change over the last 3 years. I think the last thing I'd say is there's been a huge and tremendous move in financial institutions building and delivering digital solutions. Naturally, clients are now more and more involved in their own financial processes. They want to see more, they want to control more and ask more questions because they see more data. And our web APIs and Six's development in that area is directly linked to the demand in there. Finally, David mentioned tick data. You look at risk and compliance at the top there. Tick data is integral to that process, and a lot of reporting and post-trade type work in the compliance space needs this type of data. And obviously, we have lots of institutions that use their own tools. We have many that use third-party tools to do that. But no matter where you go, you need high-quality tick data in order to do that. So interesting to see that that's come up as a trend. And not only that they want to shift and change their vendor, but they actually want more data. You often in this industry think about people taking data and switching between different vendors. In this particular space, it's interesting because people seem to want more than they get already. So there's just a few little insights from over the last 3 years of doing the project.
So when listening to you, I believe like there is a need for cost efficiency, but also flexibility, right? And cloud native solutions, also APIs. So would that summarize it? Matt?
Yeah, correct. I see a big shift in that. And obviously, lots of institutions are at a different level in terms of their development within that cloud space. But it's important in the data space to be able to get the data in the delivery format you want from the place you want it. And now there are many more options, even in the last 3 years of this study, many more options now available. You've seen that, again, there's a majority adoption of platforms, of the Snowflake, Databricks, and obviously the big cloud providers. So you're starting to see the buy side, interestingly, a bit quicker than the sell side. We did studies in previous years which showed that the buy side particularly were ahead on this game. But yes, it's meaning that we still stay in an interesting dynamic space. And I think, understanding how the market data industry and its landscape is changing through these studies is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've been talking about data delivery, and I mean, I'm looking at Hank. I mean, this is so close to his heart, right? And let me see how to formulate the next question best. So what about you taking us back 3 years when you actually started working at Six? So when it comes to data delivery, how was the situation and what happened ever since? We've been collaborating quite a bit, Hank. So what do you see today? How do clients, like, where did we start? How do our clients consume data today? And maybe also a little bit, what is on the horizon?
Yes, a great question, and a lot has happened in the last 3 years. But when I look back, obviously Six then had a number of great delivery options available, call them customer interfaces. But what struck me, and that's not a surprise really, I think other vendors are experiencing the same, is that these delivery options were simply the result of Six having built products and services for the last 10, 20 years, and probably acquiring some services along the way as well. They were not the result of a particular strategy in mind, they were just a consequence of having done stuff. And you end up, like most vendors do, with a myriad of different delivery options, some really good, but competing with one another, with overlapping kind of like features and content sets. And that's not a good place to be, because that confusion gets transferred across to the customer. What do you choose? You can choose between these 3 things, and they do all things reasonably well. So we said that's not the way to go. We need a strategy, and we've been interviewing our clients, been thinking about this. And surprisingly, to be honest, the answer of what clients were looking for is remarkably easy. They wanted effectively 3 things from us, or any vendor on that matter. First of all, I think for a given use case from a customer perspective, they expect the vendor to have one preferred delivery option. That's what you want to use, Mr. Customer, because we know it's tried and tested, is the thing to use. And take the complexity away of presenting 2, 3 different things that the client then has to somehow figure out what will work best for him. The second thing is that delivery option the vendor puts forward needs to be strategic to the vendor, something that the vendor invests in, feels quite passionate about, has longevity, right, in terms of being relevant 3, 5 years from now. Don't present effectively a dead end to a customer. It's the only thing you've got, but you might actually kill it in 2 years' time. That will always actually backfire. So present something with longevity in mind. And the third, I think, driver for our strategy, coming back from customer feedback, was that they want simplicity. Simplicity in the customer journey. So this whole exercise of exploring technology and content from a vendor perspective, experimenting, trialing, going live with something, that needs to be quick and easy. And that wasn't the case in the past, but this is what customers expect today. It needs to be simple. And we took that on board and we said, okay, fine, given the services that SIX offers, and we offer a lot of content and a myriad of different type of content sets with different features, we decided we only needed 5 delivery options. We have a display tool. We had it then, we still have it today. It's called 6ID, just one. We made it web friendly though, because it wasn't web friendly then, so it is now. So we have a thin version on top of the thick, which is proving very popular, obviously. Second, we also are very big from a SIX perspective in non-streaming content sets, reference data, end-of-day pricing data, intraday pricing data, corporate actions, the list goes on. But data that typically clients still today, and David probably will agree, but based on the feedback he's been getting through these research exercises, file delivery options are still very popular. They're not necessarily kind of like rocket engineering, but they work and they're simple. So we need a file delivery system. And guess what? We had one 3 years ago, Flex, but it probably didn't get enough attention. We had some competing services. Now it is the go-to file delivery service for our customers. If they come to us and ask for a file delivery option, we will present Flex. And we've invested a great deal in making it better compared to 3 years ago, and it's proven more successful ever since. And a suite of APIs, not 1, but 3, because we believe that different use cases warrant a slightly different view on technology and how you use that. And the 3 are quite simple as well. We needed a cousin to Flex, the file delivery system in the API space, something we actually launched very recently, just a few months ago, called the bulk API. It does what a file delivery system does over an API, but faster, more performant, and is perfectly positioned to feed databases and initialize those things and keep them current for large, mostly static data sets. We needed an API to meet the display use case. Matt mentioned the web API, and I'll get to it in a second. So we built a web API with that display use case in mind. Very unique, because you want to bring a myriad of different content sets together to create a visualization of data, a user experience. Content request response is important, simplicity as well, and that's the web API for us. And then we have a performance API, which is geared towards sending large amounts of fast-moving data, latency sensitive, to customers, predominantly feeding middle and front office applications. But it's that simple 5, we don't need 20. And that's what we rallied around. And we managed in those 3 years to build them. And one in particular, I can actually showcase real quick. Just bear with me a second while I bring it up, is the web API I was mentioned before. It was launched about 18 months ago, and it very much ticks those 3 boxes I mentioned before. If a customer has a display use case, we will present to the customer the web API. That's what you want to use, Mr. Customer. We believe in it, and it's definitely successful for other clients. Second, it is being invested in. We have a great team behind it, and it's even growing, and it's strategically relevant to us. So it's going to get better for years to come. And 3, it is simple. There's a portal. Everything you need is in front of you, right on the public internet, where there's documentation, Swagger interfaces, and sample code, and so on. And we've gone that far to even build a demo app, which I can show you here, which is a live app, publicly available. It's fictitious. It shows you a portfolio management tool, and it's running on the web API, and it shows the customer the end result. But it shows you on the right, as you can see here, how you get there, what's happening under the bonnet. What is this web API really doing for you? And it shows you, for example, what the query is to get to a particular data point on that GUI, and what the response is from the web API to get there, so to speak. And that works very well because you demystify technology. It doesn't have to be hard. And you make it very, I think, tangible to the client what the technology can do for them. And we've signed up many clients in the web API or on the web API in the last 18 months, more than 50. And the average go-to-market time is between 2 and 4 weeks from them exploring the technology and going live with an application, which is remarkably fast in our industry. So we clearly ticked a couple of interesting boxes. That's what happened, Andrea, in the last 3 years.
What do you want to add to that?
And it's very difficult sometimes to demonstrate to the business within a bank or a buy side exactly why you should subscribe to new technologies and take new data sets. But what you're looking at right now for any developer is super simple and they want to use it. And also for anyone in business, whether you're in private banking or whether you're on the buy side, having a look at that, this just makes sense. This is what your customers look at. And interestingly, because we built this, we've had a lot of feedback about what types of data points are most interesting. What you're looking at on screen there is actually one of our global indices. So one of the things that people use a lot in these display applications are global index benchmarks. And naturally, traditionally, these came from a whole set of specific monopolized providers. The uptake on our own global set of indices has been pretty big, and a lot of people subscribing through web APIs to develop display applications to people who don't necessarily need an exact benchmark but want to see what the performance of Europe or the UK or France looks like. It's super simple and incredibly cost effective. So SIX itself is working very closely and now with a good base of customers and a good base of feedback is developing the content accordingly. So yeah, you'll start to see the SIX name sourcing quite a few of these public and internal solutions going forward.
Thank you very much for sharing. And I mean, look, it makes me proud. We've been working on this for a while, right? To make it really simple, to have the showcase, to make like self-exploration, self-discovery, like really at your fingertips. You can just go there, you just enter our public web page, then you go into the API portal and you can see all the endpoints, you can see the showcase. So it's all there for you. Thank you for demoing that, Hank. And this actually brings me to the last question I asked before. So what do we have on deck now? What else are we investing our time in? Maybe if you could touch a little bit more on the cloud-based platforms and how you see them changing the data distribution.
So happy to do that, Andrea. And there's some statistics as well we can bring up, to explain what's going on. It's a complex market, right? Matt mentioned it too. Gets David excited because lots is happening. But I think for vendors, it's tough to keep up, and you need to. It goes back to keep it simple, right? You can't, as a vendor, somehow superimpose the complexity back to the customer and ask them to figure it out, so to speak. And you can see in front of you some statistics from the survey where you can see that, yeah, clients do different things, right? And there's no particular thing standing out. They might go straight to the source. They may go to vendors. They may decide to use third-party packages where the vendor data actually is bundled in. Or they might even go a little bit more kind of like advanced and start to leverage some of these cloud-based native solutions too. So how do we go about this? Well, it's a tough one. I think from a SIX perspective, at least the way we approached it is the following. It goes back to my previous point. Choose your battles, be quite clear on the solutions you want clients to rally around, because you know it's going to make their life easier. Yes, SIX has many more delivery systems, services than the ones I've highlighted, and they're still very relevant. But for new clients asking us to do something, we're very clear on what technology they should embrace, because we think it's going to give them the biggest bang for their buck, a good journey that can last for years. So be clear. Second, make sure that those technologies are actually modern, and that sounds a bit simple, but more specifically web and cloud friendly, because those are environments where clients clearly are doing more, and they don't do it all in the cloud, but they're doing a lot more than before. So make sure that your technology is somehow compatible, and our APIs are a good example of that compatibility baked into the solution itself. I think the connectivity aspect is key as well. So how do you get as a client to that content from the vendor? Fine, I can use this interface, but how do I connect? Well, in the SIX domain, lots of our content isn't latency sensitive, isn't voluminous, so to speak. And the internet actually is a godsend, right? It's always there. It's nowadays very stable. So use the internet because you can just leverage it right away. I wouldn't probably have stated that 10 years ago when the internet was still a little bit less reliable than it is today. But for non-latency sensitive applications, just use it. And SIX actually promotes it and has it available through all its services for those use cases. But For the latency sensitive use cases, or the use cases where the volume of data becomes kind of like an issue for the internet, offer dedicated connectivity, and offer connectivity as a service. Don't expect the client to have to figure out what connectivity provider to work with, how to effectively set this all up. They might not even know, they may not have the teams to support that. And SIX embarked on a partnership with Megaport, and we created connectivity as a service dubbed SIX Connect. So we have the plumbing in place that connects to hundreds of data centers and the major public cloud providers, so that when the client wants us to connect and create dedicated connectivity, we can just turn it on with the flick of a switch, literally. And the third, I think, topic which is important here is, well, fine, yes, some clients will expect your data to be bundled with software, so you have to partner. And a vendor can't partner with everybody. That's just impossible. But with the right partners, giving your clients base and their use cases, make sure that works well. So of course, we have a great partnership team that explores these partnerships, grows them, because that makes the client journey very easy, because the data is so simply an aspect of the experience baked into the solution. They don't have to worry about it. So that's important too. And that brings me to the last point, which is the cloud bit. It's also on this slide there as a statistic. Certain cloud-based solutions or native solutions have definitely become more popular, especially in the market data space. We recognize that too. We can't be everywhere, but we do have a cloud view. We want to be in Snowflake. We are in Snowflake because of the majority of the customers in our client base wishing us to be there. And it's almost like the absolute, I think, top of the mountain in terms of easeability, because at the end of the day, if the vendor's data is in Snowflake and the customer is using it already as well, then the connection is instant, right? There is no ETL involved anymore. Obviously, not every client is using Snowflake. We don't expect clients to be in Snowflake, but if they are and they're important to us, we need to serve them. So we've embarked on that Snowflake journey as well. We are live with a couple of, I think, anchor clients. That works well. Next year, we're going to do a lot more. We're going to focus on our tax and rec data sets, and I'll put that into Snowflake, because we have a couple of exciting use cases and unique data sets that might lend themselves well to be put in that environment. So more to come for sure on that side in the new year.
And maybe for when it comes to SIX's role in direct and indirect data delivery, could you explain this a little bit?
Yes, I think this often goes back to does a client really get it straight from the vendor, or is an intermediary involved? And that goes back to my point about partnerships too. There's also, of course, the whole concept of a redistributor. I know that particular partner takes an active interest in acquiring the rights to redistribute that content. Obviously, there's a cost involved as well doing so, and the complexity of doing so. SIX, again, as I guess most of the vendors out there, don't differentiate really. We want to service both the direct consumers and the redistributors. And we can actually advise the redistributors on what to care for, because we are a redistributor ourselves on a very large scale. So we have great insights into the complexities, the rules, right, the conditions applied, managing data as a redistributor, and that's a completely different domain. I don't think we actually going deep into this, in this particular study. It's very interesting to a certain extent as well. So we can play a role in the consultancy kind of aspect of how a customer needs to navigate this, because if you're doing it the wrong way, it can be very costly and painful. And we're there because we've been there before and can definitely guide you in the right way, so to speak. So I hope that answers that question of direct, indirect connectivity or customers, Andrea.
Thank you very much. And this brings me back to you, David. I mean, actually, we cannot pass right on the buzzword of the century, AI. Also, the study's name is Market Data in the Age of AI. So I wonder, I mean, what do we see, from the buy side? What are they using AI for? How?
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah. I think before we even get to that, it's been very good listening to Henk and Matt talking about meeting customers where they are. I think that's been a big part of our research and our findings, because they are presented with a variety of ways to receive data, whether that's through APIs, through their own software applications, internal and external, through cloud providers, and increasingly, as Hank was just talking about, these data platforms like Databricks and Snowflake. It's just reflecting on that. I think that's worth pausing and reflecting that that's a critical piece of this, is to sort of have empathy for the journey of the clients and being presented with a lot of different options and managing that internally and keeping things simple and reliable. And then there was another theme about demystifying the technology and making things very compatible with the journey. And I think demystification is actually a big part of what Coalition Greenwich does in terms of this space, in terms of understanding like what are the developments that are happening that are impacting the delivery and consumption of market data. And so, as you mentioned, that's sort of the segue into this theme of AI, which is, we titled the report "Market Data in the Age of AI" for a reason, and because we are seeing the age of AI machine learning. It is here. It is having a major impact on market data delivery, on consumption. It's strongly impacting the perceptions of wealth managers, of private banks, of asset managers, of how market data will change in the coming years and how they will use it. And so we believe this era of generative AI and agentic AI offers opportunities for these firms to reinvent their research and investment workflows. And, AI, it's not just trading signals or, influencing algorithmic trading, switching between algorithms intraday, let's say. We see wealth managers and private banks seeing a bigger opportunity here, and that is to reinvent themselves using generative AI, including the automation of internal business processes, improving that in customer experience, using predictive analytics, and even making some better investment decisions. So that leads to sort of probably the most important piece of this is that based on our research, and this has been consistent over a few years, despite the increasing role of AI machine learning across that investment and trading workflow, our respondents, the people we talk to, don't believe that humans will be replaced anytime soon. Rather, the machines will simply make better recommendations, will help the personnel make better decisions among a range of options. So whether that be customer service, generating investment ideas, or ultimately even some trading decisions. So humans will continue to be responsible and accountable for these decisions and outcomes. And I think this is probably the most important implication of that. Most important is that the application of AI machine learning tools and techniques to market data also reinforces the need to get the data right and get it accurately. And so we see AI machine learning, these steps, these processes as downstream of high quality data from reliable sources. You could sort of make the relationship clear if you look at like corporate actions, right? We know that if you have bad corporate actions data, your processes are all messed up downstream. So the same can apply to AI processes. So a range of high quality data sets can be powerful. So one area we see, for instance, is in these embedded AI tools that are in the research and investing platforms today, we now see them leveraging a range of data, whether it be public markets data, private markets data, and even increasingly alternative data. So more data sets are coming in. There's an emphasis on quality, bringing it all together and making that integration, normalization, and even coding, because AI machine learning makes coding a lot easier, coding against these data sets far easier than it was before. So that being said, we're a long ways of having widespread adoption, but overall the benefits are clear. These professionals can use AI to synthesize large amounts of data, including basic information, government websites, document search, all the basic stuff. They can do that and get it into manageable pieces of their workflow quickly. But again, it all depends on getting that good data, that high quality data first. So I think that's how we're seeing, Andrea, the application of AI across that investment workflow today.
Okay, so translating this into my words, that would mean that we see, AI definitely contributing, to what we are doing and like helping, equipping human beings, right? We do not see them being replaced. So this is what I hear from you. Oof. So that's good to hear, right? But definitely, I mean, we're on a journey, everyone, right? Learning to get along with AI, how to best use it, how to validate then the data, and see how we can integrate it into our workflows. So that's definitely an interesting result here. Henk, what is your view on this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I recently had a conversation about this too, and I think ChatGPT, for example, right? So if you compare that to an old school Google search, which one is better? Which one gives you the better kind of like, you know, experience? The ChatGPT one. Why? Because you can ask a question in a clever way and get a clever response back. With the old school Google search, you just type in a couple of keywords and you just hope that somehow magically in the top 10 will be something that you were looking for. I think that's the way to look at it. You just get more efficient about getting the result or the insight you're looking for. It's not replacing, it's actually fast tracking that answer. So you have to rethink the way we work and rethink the role we can play. Don't play a role in the simple things that can be automated, but play a role in where things actually the AI side can't help anymore. So it's an interesting space, and I think within Six in the factory, we're using AI left, right, and center to be more clever about how we can get kind of like the data to work and cleanse it and model it. So that's very exciting. But from a user perspective too, there will be changes, right? The concept of a static desktop that looks the way the vendor wants it to look will be gone, I think, in the future, because you can probably just tell the desktop what you want to see as a user, and it's going to build a customized view for you on the fly. And we've seen some prototyping on that already internally as well. That's not too far away. We've partnering, as an example, also we're partnering with Bridgewise, and if you don't know these guys, it's worth looking them up. And this is about actually providing investment advice based on AI. It doesn't tell you have to buy this, but if you're interested in these type of securities and kind of like, you want to see where potential upside is based on what's happening in the marketplace, with very recent data, as recent as today, which a typical investment report doesn't do, an investment report is stale, it goes back to events that happened probably months ago, then these systems can start to serve that up. So it's an interesting conundrum, and I guess there's far more upside than downside, but we have to keep our eyes open, I think, right? That's David, that's your point as well. You can't be naive about it. But it's interesting to see how things start to yield real results, the way that the impact is starting to become really tangible and material. I find that quite exciting, because that wasn't quite the case, right? 12, 18 months ago. I think it's flipping around fairly quickly.
David.
Just reflecting on what Henk said, I think these tools are getting much more pervasive across the workflow. And I think where we see it is some of the more basic queries, right? Basic search, basic information, document search, some basic, building up an investment thesis on an industry fairly quickly. But some of the more complicated workflow and steps related to investing is still a long ways off. And I think that's where people recognize these tools. If you just look at the research findings, those tools can make them smarter, can make them better, and they can make them faster. It won't necessarily replace them. And I think that's where we are today in the industry.
Thank you very much. And this already, being time sensitive, I promised everyone that there will be enough time for questions, right? So this is your call. So everyone listening now, please, I encourage you to submit your questions after my next round with, let's say, didn't talk too much to Matt. Maybe one question for you, one final question. I mean, what areas of market data are you experiencing the greatest demand?
Yeah, sure. So, we've gone through many themes today. And just to start where we just finished on the AI point, obviously there's an awful lot of conversation about, firstly, the initial use of that type of technology internally as a productivity gain. And I think it's interesting because some individual users within financial institutions are actually better at using and prompting AI than potentially their enterprises at the moment. And the enterprise itself has quite a way to catch up. If you want to have and to be able to use that type of technology effectively, the quality of your data has to be good. And I think a lot of institutions that didn't take their own data quality, so this is internal data to you, seriously, and also the kind of streamlining and the quality of the data you get from third parties seriously, the outputs that you'll get through the AI you implement will not be nearly as good as what they could be. So I think that, you know, the idea you can strap on an AI agent to existing legacy technologies and hope to suddenly have massive gains doesn't quite work. And there's an awful lot of data work involved in that. What types of data people are looking for there? Obviously, the kind of data we've been working through our web APIs. So this is non-latency sensitive type of data. This is the kind of data that, for example, in a traditional wealth manager or private bank, or even an asset manager, you need on-the-fly data just to give you ideas around what's happening around the market. And the AI is there to facilitate more structured questioning. I think in the future, the use of semantic searching is going to be massive. So this is where you're actually able to use AI for unstructured data. So, for example, we recently made an investment in a fixed income firm, principally who deliver term sheets. And this type of data traditionally really heavy, really difficult to interrogate. And the power of and the ability of AI to then start to interrogate and make connections between that type of data, it's going to supercharge the ability of financial institutions to use data better and to be smarter. So we get asked quite a lot about that. The data types, the asset types of data we're asked about quite a lot, normally follows what the market's doing. So in more recent times, we've seen a lot of interest in digital asset data, crypto asset data. In terms of our packaging of that, you know, we follow the specific angle in which we are strong, which is this risk and regulatory angle in the delivery of things like the crypto asset reporting framework and so forth. And as mentioned before, you know, we have the ability to deliver our tick data, and there's been an awful lot of interest in that, again linked to the risk and regulatory space. So to be honest with you, you know, SIX's strategy to deliver data across the full spectrum from the intraday history all the way to the performance API is ideal for institutions, because you do need that data all the way from intraday historical through to performance. And obviously that also includes the fact that, you know, we're building out quite significantly our exchange business across Europe with the acquisition of Aquis and other things. So, you know, we want to provide data to customers from what we used to do and what we were very good at, which was provisioning data, file format, through to kind of back office, end of day process, but now really offering options to people around the real time. And I think, you know, if you bring back AI, if you bring back digital, you know, the norm going forward will be that people will want to see and play with data, and they want to see it move, and they want to see it tick on the screen. So our whole strategy is around delivering the very best of quality at that frequency to the place where you need that data. And I think that really shows a massive step change from where SIX potentially was 5 or 6 years ago. And it's great that we've got a lot of support from the board of SIX to develop these strategies, because data really is what is going to fuel a lot of all these technologies that are coming forward through the future.
Fantastic. So, I mean, to sum this up, so the market wants real time, it wants quality, it wants really solid delivery, right? And Matt, in one sentence now, what is SIX's response to that?
Yeah, so, you know, whether you're a client on this call or whether you're an interested party in what SIX are doing, there's a significant evolution and investment in data and data delivery to the financial industry. This is, you know, is showing itself through big advancements in the technology that Henk talked about, big advancements in the people we partner with, getting our data to where you want to get it, and obviously doing an awful lot around the quality and enriching the data that we have to provide a lot of new use cases, which traditionally, if you were a SIX customer, you weren't able to provide.
It's really hard to keep you short, but I mean, Henk wants to add to that. So it's more than one sentence. Yes, absolutely.
Every channels in our customer interfaces, as I mentioned earlier, the bulk API live, the web API, fantastic success story, beefed up our display tool, improved our file delivery system called Flex. What are we going to focus on next year, 2026? We're going to carry on with these things we've been building anyway, but we're definitely going to pivot more to streaming market data We can see that there is growing demand. Customers expect more from SIX in that space. So we have a great kind of like investment plan around the streaming side. We have already released a tick data offering this year with ticks by SIX that demonstrates a lot that this service actually pushing forward. So we're not blind to these signals where clients say, listen, guys, we want you to kind of like do more in these areas, and we definitely are. So we're quite excited about streaming and tick history in particular, in combination with solidifying our cloud solution, which will be focusing predominantly on this Snowflake experience where we can see the demand loud and clear and we can't ignore it. So that's a couple of key things that are very real for us at the moment going into 2026.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I mean, I could talk with you for hours, but then again, it's time for Q&A, and let's have a look on the questions that were submitted. So let me start. I will just pick one. I will start with, why is real-time market data use becoming even more prevalent throughout the day? Could you say something about that, maybe, David?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a really simple one, but it is also profound. And it's, real-time data is not just about trade execution. It's not just about, trade operations. We're seeing leading use cases for real-time, including the middle and back office, including both portfolio reporting and, I think most interestingly, risk and compliance. And sort of that more real-time, more intraday views on risk and compliance is actually a major theme across a lot of our Coalition Greenwich research. We're seeing the rise of closer to 24/7 trading in some asset classes. Sort of round-the-clock trading means that risk and compliance functions are trying to be more mindful and more, let's say, informed throughout the trading day of what's going on. So I'd say we see more of that intraday snapshot kind of real-time data throughout the risk and compliance function, which is in itself great. I mean, we want our risk and compliance departments to be sharper.
Thank you very much. And there is some questions around like the commercial side. So how much does that cost? Matt, maybe this would sit with you. So when we look at market data, so what's the price?
Yeah, naturally, there's always a lot of questions about this, and also, cost management is an annual process, no matter what financial institution you sit in. I think in this space, yes, from the source itself, if you sit within a financial institution, you probably would have seen more creativity and more differentiation between the types of pricing model that the source itself is giving you. As a vendor, obviously, we pass through costs and we make those costs kind of simple, but those costs increase on us just as they would do if you were to take the data direct. I think some things, looking forward, there's a lot of people that want to know more clearly what can they take without necessarily being impacted by license costs. And I think managing your data and the use of data relative to licensing is very important. Next year, obviously, in Europe, we're looking forward to, we hope, the consolidated tape. I think this will be very advantageous because it will make the delivery and the cost of data better, certainly on the retail side. So if you think of these display use cases that are growing quite rapidly, that type of consolidated market, which has been around in the US for quite a long time now, should bring some advantage. But I think also, one of the big cost factors here is where you get your data from as well. And, we've seen the delivery of data and where you get data from expand. And even on the AI space, what was interesting over the 2 years we've asked the questions around the AI, the first year we asked it, it was very rare to see anyone who suggested they were seeing some positive return on an investment through that. This year we saw a good spread where there were naturally some use cases now, which after that implementation, they were getting more out of it. I don't see dramatic change in the industry in this. Again, you're going to have to pay for data, and occasionally what is not seen is the enormous amount of effort that goes into the normalization, the standardization, the quality checking, the alert checking, and so forth that goes into data. But those are some of the things that I think are probably going to impact cost going forward into the short term. Hank?
Yeah, I just wonder, Matt, would you agree with the statement that in general we don't want to arbitrage between delivery channels, right? What drives the cost ultimately is the content the client takes for a particular use case. If the client prefers to take this, over the web API because they're building, for example, a display tool, or the data is more static in nature and they're pulling it in, for example, via Flex, we wouldn't make a distinction based on the delivery channel, true?
Yeah, I know. We've talked a lot about the technological advancement of these deliveries that we've put enormous amounts of resource into in the last few years. But what's interesting is we've aligned the pricing models across the deliveries. So essentially, we want you to take the data from the delivery, which is best for you. That might be file, that might be API. You choose, but essentially, we are making it more simple at our end and enabling people who you sit in front of from SIX know that it doesn't matter how you want the data, that data will be using the same model, and therefore commercial simplicity. I think Henk was the one who said simplicity is super important. These commercial models have become dreadfully difficult and very complex into the last few years. As a vendor, we have a responsibility to make it easy to understand and to align that irrespective of how we deliver. So that's one thing which we have done more recently.
Thank you very much. Another question, it's more AI ML related. So 10 years ago, SaaS went through a revolution of going to a subscription economy. Do you see AI ML changing the future way of how you buy data? David, would that be you?
I think I've done enough to demonstrate that the AI is definitely impacting the investment and trading workflows. In terms of how they buy data, I think that might be directed to the sellers. So maybe, based on that implication of more and more AI delivery or AI functionality across the investment workflow, I'd be curious to see what Henk and Matt think.
Perhaps I can start, and then I'll leave the more difficult part to Matt. I think this is a tricky one, right? And I think it's hard to fix. Do you charge as a vendor for the data you give the client access to? They have the right to use the data, or do you charge the client for what they actively use, right? And there's a world of difference between the two. And I think vendors often approach it in different ways depending on the situation. I guess it is changing because of what AI can do. AI wants access to tons of data, but may only use very small parts of it. And of course, a vendor has an interest in charging for what you have access to, because that's the bigger pot of data the vendor actually has to serve up and normalize and cleanse and make sure it's accurate. So I think that's the philosophical debate, and I'll let Matt answer how he looks at that, because he wears a more commercial hat compared to me. But it's a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, if I was sitting at a SaaS business, obviously the concern is that you have these technologies that are coming in super rapidly, which essentially could usurp the USPs that you used to sell within that particular solution. And that's why you see those solutions tying up with other providers in that space or enhancing their functionalities around this type of technology pretty quickly. I think it doesn't change the data industry per se. You still need the data feeds within it. The licensing around that data into AI and into large language models is an interesting one, and that's evolving. I know that there's a huge, spread of opinion about how that should be licensed if you are letting a model use your data to learn how to do things. I think we'll see more of that going forward. But I mean, if you have just even a simple demonstration of an agent that is producing questions, and the agents that you produce obviously have data within them, you will still need to get data from source. And we'd still, as we said before, we wouldn't sell the data differently if, from a vendor perspective, you use it within a SaaS solution with a direct connectivity, or if you're using for AI. It's still more to do with the fact as to whether you're using that data internal to your business or whether you're using the data to actually provision things externally. I think the biggest change I've seen in the last 5 years is just the amount of data that goes out of the door. It was so much easier years and years ago where when we sent data to people, they basically just used it internally and clients never really saw anything. And your advantage, if you were a financial institution, was you held that knowledge. And when anyone wanted it, they had to come and ask you. Now it's so much more transparent. So yes, from a commercial perspective, we're not seeing huge changes from a direct fee perspective, but I think things to look out for will be the licensing around that. And if I was a SaaS platform, again, it will be an interesting conundrum as to how much you build, how much you develop, and how much you partner.
Thank you very much. And looking at the time, there is many more questions, no worries. You will get replies after the webinar, but I will stop, or I will finish this webinar with a question where I feel it will summarize also this webinar somehow on market data. So what does SIX consider as most opportunistic in the market data segment and as a result of the report findings? Let's start with Hank now. But yeah, 1 minute, Hank.
It's yeah, I could do a math and give it a very long answer.
That's why I'm starting with you, and then I give it to Hank, to Matt.
I think a key thing for me is that the real-time side, the granularity customers want, is a theme you can't ignore. It's moving. It's been moving in that direction for a long time, and it's carrying on. And I think clients, Matt said it spot on. Clients expect things to move, right, to take. Because the world has become real time. So that's for us definitely something to take away, something we already have a great journey. And as I said, we're going to heavily invest in further in 2026 to serve multiple use cases. But I'll keep you to that. The real time stuff and the tick data that goes with it to provide better insights into what happens in the financial markets.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just finish off by saying that, you know, the industry is hugely dynamic and data is still the foundation level to the decision making and to all the tools that are used. And considering more and more that data is in the hands of the public, and the public themselves can do more and more of their own interrogation on data, which they just couldn't do 5 years ago, means that, you know, what you use and how you use that data is going to be increasingly important. And this is why SIX continues to focus on the quality, making sure you have the right delivery to get the data you need. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting time. And yet again, I think we're going through it. You know, someone talked about, you know, the move to SaaS. We obviously had the move to the electronification of the market. This AI piece is just another gear.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, actually. I mean, this was so insightful. It was fun. I like the conversation that you had, and it brings me to the end of the webinar. We've started actually with a check-in question, and now before you run, again, no worries, your questions will be answered, so you will receive an email. But what I'd like you to do is to go to the commentary field yet again and leave us a quote, a word, a short sentence on what it is that you're taking away from this market data webinar today. That would be fantastic. And with that, I would let you run. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for being here. Do not forget to leave a comment, a word, a short sentence on what you're taking away with you. And hopefully we will see each other soon. Please join one of our other webinars. We will keep you informed, updated. And thank you, Hank, Matt, David, for being here with us and walking us through this journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.